Thanks. Welcome to the May 28th, 2025 meeting of the Redmond Planning Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Aparna.
Present.
Commissioner Copley.
Present.
Commissioner Van Nyman.
Present.
Vice Chair Whittier.
Present.
And I am Chair Weston. Commissioner Coleman and Commissioner Gagne are excused tonight. I'd like to say thank you to the following staff for being present tonight: Jeff Churchill, Lauren Alpert, Glenn Coyle, Francesca Liberti, and Chris Wyatt. I look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
That's approved. And I also look for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 23rd, 2025, and the minutes from the annual workshop on April 30th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. That's approved also. All right, now it's time for us to hear public comment and items for the audience. This is for topics that aren't addressed by our public hearing on the annual docket later tonight. I'd like to remind that RCW 4217A 555 prohibits any public comment in support of or opposition to ballot propositions, measures, or candidates. And if people could keep their comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, we have one person on the items from the audience, David M. And I just remind that say your full name and address, please.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm David Morton, Redmond 98053. After reviewing the Redmond 2050 transportation element, its appendices, and the current transportation master plan, I want to commend the city for its forward-thinking and comprehensive approach. The vision of a Redmond in 2050 with a resilient, equitable, and sustainable transportation system is one that I wholeheartedly support. The focus on creating vibrant, connected neighborhoods centered around a high-quality transit is precisely the direction you need to take to manage growth and enhance quality of life. The commitment to a complete multimodal system with robust pedestrian and bicycle networks is particularly laudable. I'm especially encouraged by the emphasis on preparing for and organizing around the expansion of light rail. This, along with the innovative plan-based concurrency management system, demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of how to link transportation and land use to build a better city. The detailed strategies for transportation demand management are also a key strength. However, as I look to this ambitious future, as we look to it, there are a few points I'd like to raise. First, while the vision is inspiring, its implementation is critical. I'm concerned about the ability to secure the necessary funding to make this vision a reality, especially given the scale of investment required. The appendices describe the transportation facilities plan as financially constrained, raising questions about which crucial projects might be delayed or unfunded. Furthermore, the appendices project a significant increase in total greenhouse gas emissions, even as we aim to reduce per capita vehicle miles traveled. This is a serious concern. I urge the Commission to explore more aggressive strategies to ensure that Redmond's growth does not come at the expense of its climate goals. Finally, we must not lose sight of the present. The documents acknowledge that the condition of pavement in Redmond is worsening and that a staggering 80% of its curb ramps are not compliant with current ADA standards. Failing to correct these fundamental issues undermines the plan's own goals of equity and inclusion. All residents must be able to navigate the city safely. This is foundational to the vision. Thank you for your time and your commitment to Redmond's future.
Thank you. All right, that's all for tonight. All right. Well, in that case, we will start our work on the 2025-2026 annual docket, bringing up Glenn Coyle.
Everybody, we're just waiting for the presentation to load. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, planning commissioners. Long time no see. Happy to see you all. I am Glenn Coyle, senior planner in Redmond's Planning and Community Development Department. Also online is Francesca Liberti from our planning department's transportation plan and engineering team that's representing this particular one of the docket items here today. All right. So tonight we will go over the comprehensive plan amendment process known as the annual docket, which was discussed in more detail at the February 12, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. We will review the applications received, go over the threshold criteria for docketing amendments, and discuss next steps. We'll then hold a public hearing, and afterwards, the commission may choose to hold a study session on this item. The annual comprehensive plan docket process is the method in which a community's comprehensive plan can be amended in the period between periodic updates. This is required by state law, and the process is adopted into Redmond's zoning code. It's a two-step process that occurs over a roughly 18-month period. The first step, which is where we are at now, is shown on this slide, and the city receives applications for possible amendments. Using the threshold criteria, staff analyzes, and the Planning Commission recommends, whether the amendment should be considered as part of the docket. Applications may be proposed by the community, city staff, the city council, or the Planning Commission. The amendment itself is not analyzed at this point, and only council can adopt the amendment. For this cycle, we have received one application which was submitted by the city. The proposal is the transportation element and transportation master plan update. As noted in the application in your materials in attachment A, the application proposes updating the transportation master plan, which is adopted in part as part of the comprehensive plan, as well as related updates to the transportation element. The intended outcomes of this amendment are a streamlined transportation element with some content required under the Growth Management Act moved to the Transportation Master Plan, or as we call it, the TMP. Additionally, another outcome is an updated TMP that includes transportation element appendices, some of which are not required under the GMA, Growth Management Act, and can be updated more easily and on a more frequent cadence. As noted, the purpose of this step in the amendment process is to determine whether the amendment meets the docketing threshold criteria to be included on the docket. There are 6 considerations as noted in this slide. This slide summarizes that the proposed amendment meets the criteria. Detailed analysis can be found in your packet as attachment B. It should be noted that this plan update, this amendment, has been ongoing, and due to timing issues, will be completed next year outside of the Redmond 2050 update process, which is why it is proposed for the annual docket. Next steps. Staff is proposing that the Planning Commission make its recommendation by the June 11th meeting, but no later than July 1st per the schedule in the Redmond zoning code. This, in effect, would be the June 25th meeting. And that concludes our presentation, and turn it back to Chair Weston for the public hearing. Thank you.
All right, so at this point, we are going to open the public hearing.
We have 2 speakers for the public hearing. The first one is Ben Y, and I just remind you to, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your full name and address.
Ben Varon. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Ben Varon. I'm here representing ownership to request consideration of a comprehensive plan amendment to address a split zone condition on the property located at 6900 188th Avenue Northeast. My statement tonight is supplementary to the email request sent to the Planning Commission earlier this afternoon from Rebecca Bloom. You've heard our team comment on this site in the past. We are interested in pursuing residential use on the site, which is currently split zoned business park BP and corridor mixed use CMU. The zoning code is about to change to disallow residential uses in BP zones, even though it is currently allowed in that zone. We suggested changes to the draft code to allow housing, but the comprehensive plan docket before you tonight presents an alternative solution. We would urge you to put this map fix on the annual comprehensive plan docket. The code provides the Planning Commission this authority. We'd simply be looking for uniform CMU zoning across the entire site. Under that designation, residential use would be allowed, which is an excellent outcome for this site, considering adjacencies to school district property, a park, and other residential uses. Lastly, this request is consistent with the overall vision and goals of the comprehensive plan. Thank you for advancing this pragmatic solution to delivering more housing in Redmond.
Thank you. All right, anyone else for the public hearing tonight?
Yes, the next speaker is David M.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners and staff. I'm David Morton, Redmond 98053. I'm here to voice my strong support for adding the amendment of the comp plan's transportation element and master plan update to the 2025 to 2026 annual docket. I've reviewed the application and the staff's analysis, and I completely agree with the rationale presented. Streamlining the transportation element by moving the more technical dynamic appendices into the transportation master plan is a logical and efficient step. This will provide the city with the necessary flexibility to keep its transportation plans current and responsive to Redmond's evolving needs, which is a critical function of good governance. However, my support for docketing this item goes beyond simple administrative efficiency. This update is not just a housekeeping task, it's an essential opportunity that you should seize. As I noted before, while the vision in the current transportation element is commendable, there are significant challenges that must be addressed. This docketed update process is the correct forum for that work. Specifically, I urge you to use this opportunity to develop a more robust financing plan. This includes securing dedicated funding to complete the active transportation networks and to increase transit frequency, providing genuine alternatives to driving. Redmond should also develop more aggressive strategies to ensure that overall greenhouse gas emissions decline. While the goal of a 50% per capita vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, reduction is laudable, if total emissions still increase as forecast, Redmond is not meeting its climate obligations. And critically, Redmond must create a concrete action plan to rectify existing deficiencies, like the fact that 80% of the city's curb ramps are not ADA compliant. The plan's vision of a Redmond where residents can safely walk or roll to their destinations is directly undermined by this failing infrastructure. Addressing these foundational safety and equity issues cannot be postponed. Voting to docket this amendment not only approves a work item, it commits to a process that will directly tackle these fundamental challenges. I urge you to recommend that the council approve this item for the docket. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments. All right, so we will close the verbal portion of the public hearing and leave open the written portion. All right, so turning this back to Glenn so that we can have our study session.
All right, that actually goes back to you, Chair Weston, but we do have some general questions or context. A, is there any issues based on the public comments that should be discussed or included in the issues matrix? Are there any other issues to discuss? You noted about the hearing, and then the schedule on a recommendation. And with the hearing still being open, I guess we would defer that to the next meeting. So ultimately, it's just whatever issues you'd like to discuss on this.
All right, so should we possibly start an issues matrix?
It's really up to the commission here.
All right, why don't we see what we come in with, and then we can go from there. Does anyone have any comments on the docket items? Commissioner Copley.
Would now be a suitable time to recommend that we add the changing of the zoning in the CMU site that is split zoned BP and CMU to the docket?
So I think that's an excellent question. Glenn, do you mind bringing up the timeline slide again?
The timeline?
Yes, please.
And I can provide some context to help you on that Copley's question too.
That would be wonderful.
Let me just get this up real quick. Timeline was just, let me make sure we're talking about is it this timeline?
Yes, please.
And in terms of Commissioner Copley's question, it is up to a vote of the commission whether that is something they would recommend being included in the docket. As staff, though, we would ask, since this was a proposal that just came in today, that we would like to be able to at least have till the next meeting to do the threshold kind of criteria analysis to determine the feasibility of inclusion. But ultimately, it's a vote of the commission whether or not.
So since it's been a very long time since we've had a docket, because the city's been doing Redmond 2025, can you remind us just how, so generally there would be a pre-application meeting prior to March 15th,
So,
and then just how that process works in
yes.
relationship to this item?
So generally speaking, as shown on this slide, and this really, some of this is to help staff be able to prepare and community members, and this really applies more to privately proposed amendments because they're just a little bit different type applications. You know, there's a lot of different topics. So generally, we try to have a pre-meeting if someone has an idea for an application. A, to see, is this even a comprehensive plan type amendment? Maybe it is something totally different. Maybe they just need a permit to put a different water heater in their house, because that wouldn't be a comprehensive plan amendment. I know that's an extreme example, but we would have a pre-meeting like that in order to just determine whether the applicant should provide or could provide an application, because there's also a fee associated with that. So we have that kind of pre-meeting, and then we just have this open window for about 3 months at the beginning of the year, and that's where we have the pre-meeting. And as noted, we try to have that at least a couple of weeks before the application period closes, just so enough time they can prepare their materials, submit application, things like that, and also for staff. And then the applications are due April 1st, and then now we're kind of in that process between April, May, and June while we kind of review, do the threshold criteria. And normally there's a multiple applications. But with that said, you know, city-initiated type amendments don't necessarily have to go through that kind of similar process. Usually internally, we're aware of potential applications. There could be just minor corrections that staff are aware of and know that, well, oh yeah, there was an error in the comprehensive plan, we need to make an amendment. You know, there's multiple variables. Maybe a new state law came down, we needed to make some change to the comprehensive plan. So we wouldn't have, so even though we, you know, staff would, the city would still submit an application, it wouldn't really necessarily go through this process, but it still goes through the docket process because state law says all amendment processes have to be studied concurrently so we can see the cumulative effects. So if there's a transportation amendment at the same time, a land use amendment, you know, we don't want these impacts to negatively or, negatively impact each other or cause some repercussions that are there. So that's why we have this kind of all move together in the same process there, so.
And then for the private ones, in general, so not necessarily this year, but just in the past and the standard way of happening, if someone misses this application window, then it rolls into the next year's
Yes.
docket?
Generally, we would work with the applicant to get them prepared for the next cycle, which again will open up January 1st of next year, and then they would have 3 months to submit their materials. And yes, there will be a docket next year that will be called the 26-27 docket. And it'll be a rolling process until the next periodic update which will start in about, 8-9 years now.
And then one final question just on this for my understanding, because we did hear from this group previously when we were doing the zoning code discussions. And then we'd said this feels much more like a docket item, not necessarily
Yeah.
that we weren't going to change the zone across the city to accommodate one place's request. How would that normally be something where the city does the outreach at that point, or would you expect the applicant to come back to you and follow up on that direction?
I would say it leaned more towards the applicant, but I should also note that the Planning Commission and the council, if they think it's an important issue that should be, we can be directed to, pursue that. So you have the authority, the council has the authority to say, that was something important that should be considered, please get this on the docket kind of thing. Or we recommend that it be put on the docket.
Okay.
Also, council theoretically could also have the discretion this summer when we're reviewing it with the docket with them, like this issue emerged, we believe this should be added to the docket. So.
Okay, that is very helpful context. With that background, other comments by commissioners? Commissioner Copley.
I'd be inclined to push this to the next docket, except for the fact that we have some familiarity with this site because we've seen emails and gotten communication from this group on multiple occasions just in the year I've been here. So I think there should be some commission and I would say staff familiarity with the issue. I agree with Chair Weston that it's super helpful context to understand how this typically should take place. But given what I'm looking at, which is that it meets all of the different criteria for docketing, I would recommend it.
Well, we don't know
Revote.
that because the city hasn't actually done the evaluation yet.
Got it.
Commissioner Aparna.
So I had a question, Glenn. This calendar was published earlier, correct?
Yes.
Like, when was this calendar published to the public in terms of this year's docket process?
This is actually adopted into the Redmond zoning code, and I believe it's been part of the code for 10, 15, maybe 20 years. It's a requirement under the Growth Management Act, RCW, a revised code of Washington that lays out all our processes for comprehensive plans, including comprehensive plan amendments. So I don't have the specific date of when this was officially adopted, but we know the first comprehensive plan was done in 1995. So some version of this has been around since then.
We've also had a recent reminder this year because this was in our training
Yes.
on February 12th.
No, because the reason I'm asking this is the dates haven't changed. Just out of curiosity, did the applicant even do a preliminary reach out to staff before April 1st?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would prefer the check on that to confirm.
So maybe what we could do here is start an issues matrix, add this item to, and I think the issues that we'd be interested in are just the history of communication, or a summary of the history of the communication on this item relative to this year's docket. And then also if, sorry, one more second. So I think what I would say is, I think there's a second separate question here on this item of if we should get additional information, if it is actually suited to the docket as is, or if additional.
That would be the threshold criteria. And
Exactly.
Generally, it's a binary, meets or does not meet. We can provide some reasoning for each of that.
Do you have enough information at this point from the email today and the public comment to answer that question?
We believe so. Confirm with my manager, Jeff Churchill. We believe when we saw the email that we have enough information at least to do the threshold criteria analysis in time for the next meeting.
Okay, so maybe if we add those 2 items to the issues matrix, that would be helpful. And then we can discuss further in June. Vice Chair Woodyer.
And I would just add to that, that it would be really helpful to just summarize the previous conversations from the previous issues. I remember this discussion. It was a very interesting discussion, but it would be helpful if I have all the background,
The questions then were actually,
assuming it meets the criteria.
but the questions that were asked in relation to the zoning code were actually different than the ones in the email today. It's like the same obvious root desire to develop the property, but it's what they've asked for has changed. So let's maybe start fresh.
Yeah,
where we are.
and I guess I'm saying the same thing as you. I just would love to have the full context so we can make a decision and feel good about it as quickly as possible within your timelines.
So this is just
Assuming it
a
meets the
decision
threshold.
to include it,
That's
not
correct.
a decision to decide it.
That's correct.
Commissioner Van Nymen.
I just want to summarize what I think I heard you say, which is that there was a due date of April 1st, which was missed in this particular example. But what I hear you saying is it's not a total drop dead date. We certainly could add it if we wanted. And I guess what I would say is I personally am not, given the lack of other items on the docketing process, if we're dealing with one, and now we have to deal with the second, we choose to deal with the second, hypothetically, I'm in favor of that because I don't want to get too hung up on, you need to wait a year because you missed the date. Like, if it's possible, I would be inclined to move forward with it.
I have the actual opposite preference, where unless there's a good reason to change a process for one candidate.
But what I heard is we're not changing the process, that we're still operating inside of a normal process.
I think that's the clarification we were asking for.
I will repeat that the Planning Commission and Council has the authority, if they consider items that are of city importance or that are worth studying, they can propose that it be included, with special exceptions, and kind of, right, the timing is okay this is in August where it's before council and they're about to pass the amendment to adopt the docket. That's just where some timing challenges. As an example, that's only theoretical, but we'll let.
Jeff Churchill.
Hi, Jeff Churchill. So the code gives the Planning Commission and the City Council authority to add items to the docket. The code does not set a timeline for the Planning Commission and City Council to do that. Planning Commission's decision to do that would have to be before its recommendation. City Council would have to do it before they adopt the docket. We have the process laid out here for all the reasons that Glenn described. And the process also says if the Planning Commission or the City Council decides that there's something that they want to independently add, that either body can do that. You can recommend it to the council. The council makes the decision, of course. And in considering that, you can consider all the threshold criteria. You can consider the timeline. All of those are valid considerations. Then it's up to you to decide whether or not those are, which direction you want to take it. And I think having answers to the questions that you've put on the issues matrix should help inform that discussion.
Helpful. Thank you. Other commissioner, either questions for the issues matrix or comments? Commissioner Copley.
I would prefer that all of these things happen within processes that are prescribed by staff. That said, I would also prefer that there's more housing in Redmond than there is gravel. And the zoning in that area was initially for a gravel pit, I think, if I read the email right. I think we all share that belief. So if there's any way that we can do this without unfairly allowing someone to do something that others can't, then I think we should consider it.
All right, so we will follow up on that next week with the results of the issues matrix. Does anyone have any questions specific to the city request that they would like to add? Commissioner Van Nymen.
I just want a bigger picture of like, or maybe it's not a bigger picture, maybe it's a smaller picture of an example of how this changes, you know, some specific change that would have been handled down this other path and now would be handled this way, like an example that I can really get my head around.
Can you be
With the,
with the city change?
right,
So moving things between the plants and the elements.
right.
Great. So I don't know if it's possible to add that to the issues matrix or respond now.
I would say that that might be more of a discussion of the plan itself, as opposed to whether it's going to be docketed or not. Yes. Yeah. But I will also note that the Transportation Master Plan has come to the commission previously, that this update's been ongoing. I believe they came in October, and actually Francesca and their team will be here at the next meeting to provide a status update of the Transportation Master Plan, because that process is still just going forward. You know, this is really the process for them to adopt this master plan, which has been an ongoing project for the city. And as noted, why it's part of the docket versus not Redmond 2050. And it's essentially a timing issue.
And if it's possible for me to just add a comment, in our planning meeting, we talked about this a little bit because I was very unused to the two-step process, like the nature of the two-step process. And one thing that was very helpful is just understanding like the way the notification works relative to the calendar on these two plans. So to go through Redmond 2050, that whole comp plan process versus the transportation plan and that update cycle, but there's still the notification that's separate, if I'm getting that correct.
So maybe Francesca can add more to that. Our separate planning processes have different outreach kind of schedules that it's kind of determined what the product is, what's being updated. There's a lot of different planning and project processes, you know, between construction projects that have different public notice and requirements, things like that. You know, as a master planning process, there's their own kind of public outreach plan, but then there's also, because this is also part of the comprehensive plan, there are also legal requirements for public outreach, which at the minimum includes a public hearing at the Planning Commission. That's really the kind of legal minimum for any of these, but generally it's our city and our staff and our teams and directors best practice that we usually have a comprehensive outreach process for our different planning processes. You know, attending Derby Days, email newsletters, workshops, stakeholder groups. There's a lot of different things like that, but it's really topic dependent. And I think Francesca has her hand up.
Yeah, Glenn, I'm happy to add. When we come back on June 11th, we'll be bringing our streets chapter, transit chapter, bicycle chapter, and pedestrian chapter to Planning Commission. Those components are, we're bringing them to you because they are all part of the GMA requirements that are within the TMP. So, and that's part of why we're making this adjustment, because some of those GMA required items that are in Redmond 2050 right now will be expanded upon and updated within the Transportation Master Plan. In addition, there will be much more within the Transportation Master Plan as well. But starting on June 11th and with a few more meetings to come later in the year, we'll be bringing each of the items within the TMP that are part of those GMA requirements. So hopefully that helps clarify a bit. As far as the outreach goes, I can speak a little bit to that right now and happy to go into more detail on the 11th when we're back. We've done quite a bit of outreach over the last year plus. Most recently, we've had groups led by and in collaboration with Eastside for All and some other of Redmond's organizations that Eastside for All works with. And we're happy to bring some of that feedback from those groups to our next meeting if you'd like to hear a recap.
Great, thank you. So mostly this will be setting us up so that at the next comp plan update, things are properly divided so the GMA topics are separate. But without that, we need to go through the docket process. Is that correct?
It would help streamline that. The plan, all our different we have a lot of different city plans that are adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. As you've seen, there's water plan, stormwater plan, capital facilities plan, parks plan. They all have also different state and federal requirements. They also all have their own timelines of being updated. So the challenge a lot of times is to sync those updates at the same time as Redmond 2050. Some of those updates did sync with Redmond 2050, and we were able to do it at the same time, as you saw with the park plan a couple of years ago. We did a specific, we updated the wastewater plan just before Redmond 2050, but that also triggered some additional amendments to update that as part of Redmond 2050, so that came through Planning Commission at the same time. The water system plan, it was the same thing. That plan was being updated irregardless, but we were able to keep it within the periodic update of the Redmond 2050 plan, so it could all be updated kind of in the same schedule. We do have a couple of additional plans that are being updated this year, and we're hoping to be adopted by the end of this year. Our capital facilities plan for government facilities, our storm water plan, and our fire functional plan. So that's actually why they're not part of the docket, because it's still within the umbrella of Redmond 2050. The transportation master plan was also part of that, but just, you know, as was determined by staff, the timing of completion of that just did not sync with the schedule. We felt that it was kind of out of the outer limits of Redmond 2050 process that that is going to be in a docket item as opposed to the Redmond 2050 umbrella. But it is essentially a Redmond 2050 update.
Great. Does anyone have further questions about that to add to the matrix? No. Further questions about anything else to add to the matrix? All right, so it looks like we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our study session on the 2025 annual cleanup package for the Redmond zoning code, and with Jeff Churchill.
Good evening again. It's nice to be with you. For the first time in, I didn't count how many years, but it's been a while, we have an annual code cleanup package. In the past few years, a lot of code amendments have been subsumed into the code rewrite and into Redmond 2050, so it's been a while since we had a code cleanup. So my purpose here tonight is to introduce those items in preparation for a public hearing that is scheduled at your next meeting on June 11th. Broadly, there are three kinds of zoning code amendments. We're only talking about the box on the left. The minor amendments, these are typos, there might be incorrect references, there might be unclear code for which administrative interpretations have been written, and this is an opportunity to actually clarify the code so that that interpretation is not needed anymore. So that's the box we're in, but there are other kinds that we've been dealing with over the past few years. Substantive amendments, so actually changing standards that are maybe within the existing vision and existing policy framework. And then also substantive changes that require a new policy foundation or updated policy framework. So those are the other kinds that we see. And the kind that involve a new policy framework usually involve a comp plan amendment as well. There are 6 items that were identified by staff and ready by the time that this was scheduled to come to the Planning Commission. I've included 3 that were in either the Appendix 1 or Appendix 3 of the zoning code. Actually, the technical committee has the authority to approve changes to the appendices, and so that's already done. But I wanted you to know what actually happened so that you could see the full suite of changes. The other 3 are for Planning Commission review because they live in the body of the code. I'm going to go through all of them individually, sorry. whoops, what did happen? Get back to the right screen here. I will go through each of them individually, but they deal with parking, type 5 permits, and definitions. Okay, so first one, non-conforming parking, everybody's favorite topic, but this minor code amendment says, it clarifies really something that is ambiguous in the code, that where there are sites with non-conforming parking quantities, that typically means, say, a building in Old Town that was built without parking requirements that came along later, like in the 60s or 70s. So if there are non-conforming parking quantities, a change of use, let's say it changes from a retail outlet to a restaurant, that change of use is not a trigger for requiring additional parking. Now, if the building gets bigger, then it could be. But if it's not changing size, then it's not a trigger for requiring additional parking. And the purpose really is that it makes those spaces easier to re-tenant. And often it would be very cost prohibitive to add parking. Usually a site is developed, especially if you're talking about somewhere in Old Town. It's not like there's a lot of space. And tearing down the building seems like a not ideal outcome so that we can provide some more parking spaces. So that's what this does. It just clarifies that is the intent. And it's consistent with policy TR 35. That's really the policy basis for it. And if you go back and read that, it basically says prioritize space for people in a nutshell. Okay, this one's a really simple one. There's an error about when public hearings are required. There's a table, and it says that there is no public hearing is required for a Type 5 permit application. An example of a Type 5 permit application is a master plan, for example. And the process is a Type 5 process goes directly to City Council for a decision. And it's not a legislative, land use legislative change. It's not the kind of thing that comes to the Planning Commission. But anyway, the table says there's no public hearing required, but actually that's not true. There is. The text of the code says that there is, and so we need to say that there is in the table, and that's it. A definition for culvert. This is not in the code. It is an often enough used term by applicants and staff that it would be ideal if everybody meant the same thing when they're talking about culvert. So we propose to define it so that everybody knows what we mean when we talk about a culvert in the context of a development application and the review of development applications. The proposed definition's on the screen, and it comes to us from our utility engineers in the Public Works Department. A structure, typically under a roadway, rail line, trail, or embankment, that is used to convey flow from a natural channel or drainage ditch. Okay, moving on to the three for which no action is required. This is for information. There was the use of a wrong word in our ZC Appendix 1. The correct term is zero-rise floodways in the context of its use, and so it has been changed to the correct terminology. There is another section of Appendix 1, and this requires a little bit of background. A few years ago, the City Council adopted an ordinance that repealed a portion of the critical areas regulations and moved it into 1524. But the reference was not updated in the appendix. So what we need to do is update the appendix to take into account that a few years ago, the City Council repealed or moved really a portion of text into 1524. So that's the purpose of that one. And then last, as we've been looking at different chapters, you know that we have been removing gender-specific language where appropriate. In Appendix 3, there is a term draftsman, and you can get by in that sentence without using that term or actually several other professions at all. And so the sentence was changed just not to reference those specific professions and does not change the meaning of the sentence. And there were no other instances in Appendix 3 of any gender-specific language, so that should take care of that entire appendix. The next steps for this minor amendment code package, this cleanup, is a public hearing on June 11th. And then we think it is possible that on the 25th, or even possibly after the hearing on the 11th, just depending on what issues come up, that the Planning Commission would be ready to make a recommendation. We have time reserved with the council later this summer and fall for their review and action. And that concludes the introduction to this item. And if there are discussion questions that commissioners would like to add to the matrix, or just information questions that I can answer, happy to do that.
Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Copley.
I think these are great. I just have a question out of curiosity. What was the least parking required for any previous use where the non-conforming parking might, you know, trigger no additional need for parking, but like it's a massive site, something like that in the past?
Let's see, in the past versions of the zoning code, a change of use would trigger and it didn't, there was no threshold really. It's like if you needed one additional parking space, you needed to find one additional parking space. With the revisions adopted in November by the city council, that went away, but it became unclear in all circumstances if a change of use would be a trigger. So this is really just to clarify, like, no, we really meant it. No, it's not a trigger. But in the past, prior to last November, it was a trigger. If you went from a less parking intensive use to a more parking intensive use, then there would be a need to provide more parking if it wasn't already on site.
Would you like that added to the issues matrix, or just happy to have the? Okay. Other questions? So I actually had one on one of the ones that we're not responsible for because the technical committee already did it. On the one about the zero rise floodways, just going back and looking at the Redmond zoning code, like the text where it actually was, I'm still confused. So there's a section where they're talking about FEMA and zero rise floodplains. Are those two separate definitions, or is it like FEMA floodplains and zero rise floodplains, or is it all one thing?
My understanding, and we could certainly add this to the matrix. I get you answer in writing, and so that way we make sure it's accurate. But a zero rise floodplain is not a thing. It's just an error. The correct terminology is a zero rise floodway.
I might have said it wrong. But this, I see. But in the text, it's, so then switch it the other way. Is there a FEMA floodway and a zero rise floodway as separate things? Or is there a
double check on that.
floodplain and a zero rise floodway? Because when you actually look at the text that this came from, it's still confusing.
I'll get an answer from someone who knows for sure
Amazing.
before I just blurt out what I think.
Great. Thank you. And then anyone else? Anything pop out? These seem very straightforward. It's actually fun to see this in process because it's been described and it happens every year.
Yes.
Great.
Every year that there are necessary changes identified, then we have a package. And they're actually, just for the benefit of all who might be listening and for commissioners, on the redmond.gov/zoning code webpage, there's like a button you can push on the right and says like, I have a suggestion for the zoning code. And if you find something that needs to be fixed, that's a great place to let us know.
Great. All right, so if it looks like there isn't anything else, then we will be back for a public hearing next session. Great. Next up, we have Lauren Alpert with a review of the Planning Commission norms. These were updated at the 2025 annual workshop last month.
So we discussed adding some language to the norms, but I don't think we formally voted on it or decided, so I wanted to give the commissioners an opportunity to do that. If you recall, we added "be curious" to the top of the norms for the Planning Commission.
And just a reminder for the community who wasn't there at the workshop, so these aren't our rules, these are just how we work together as a commission and our expectations from each other. In general, these kind of get passed down year to year, and then we have one chance to get together and modify them. On the whole, these seemed nice to have. Had a good discussion about some of them, but largely leaving it the same. So with that, does anyone have additional comments? Commissioner Van Nymen.
That was the only change that we made?
Yes. Okay.
Yep, the sole change was be curious. And then in that case, I look for a motion to approve these for the following year.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, so next up is staff and commissioner updates.
The only update that I have is that we did hear from Francesca just before about the TMP. They'll be coming back in June, and ahead of that, since there's a few chapters to review, we wanted to give you some extra time, so I'll be sending some of those chapters tomorrow for you to start your review ahead of the June meeting. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Great. And then any commissioner updates? No. Okay, well, in that case, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And we are adjourned.